You know how some people say funerals bring families closer? Yeah, mine ripped us apart. The morning after we buried my mum, I found a stranger in our kitchen, wearing my mother's silk robe, stirring coffee, laughing with my dad. I stood there, still in black, makeup from yesterday's service smudged under my eyes. I thought maybe I was hallucinating, but no. She turned, smiled casually and said, "Oh, you must be Dahlia. Greg told me so much about you." Greg? That's my dad. Or at least the man who used to be. I looked past her at my mom's urn on the mantel, barely cool in its new place, and suddenly the whole house felt wrong. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "This is Veronica," my mum, no, the woman who used to be my mum, said calmly as she walked in from the hallway. "She'll be staying with us for a while." I couldn't process it, not even a full day after laying Mom to rest, and suddenly there was a new queen in the castle. "But this is Mom's." I pointed at the robe, the chair, the mug, everything Veronica now claimed. Veronica chuckled, sipping. "It's okay, sweetie. Sometimes it helps to let go of the past." That was the first time I felt it, that splintering inside your chest when you realise you've just been erased. They didn't say it outright, but every glance, every word made it clear. I wasn't wanted here anymore. I was a reminder of the woman they were too eager to forget. Later that afternoon, my dad came into my room and said, "Veronica's going to use this space. You'll sleep on the couch tonight." I stared at him, speechless. "This is my room." He just shrugged. "Things change." And my mother, Marianne, she didn't defend me, not even a whisper. That night, I slept in the living room while laughter echoed from upstairs. Her laugh, Veronica's, from my mother's bedroom. At dawn, I packed a small bag and walked out. No one stopped me, no hugs, no goodbye, not even a glance from the front window, just the wind. That's when I learned that being abandoned doesn't always look like slammed doors or screamed insults. Sometimes it's soft smiles and quiet replacements, and it hurts way worse. People binge revenge stories for drama, but when you're living one, there's nothing dramatic about it. It's just cold, silent, and empty. But I wasn't going to be empty forever, not after what they did. I didn't slam the door when I left, mostly because I wasn't the one who closed it. Veronica did. She smiled, actually smiled, as she shut it in my face. "Good luck, Dahlia," she said, like she was wishing me a happy vacation. Then the deadbolt clicked, loud, final. I stood there, soaked, holding a half-zipped duffel and my mother's old sweater. It still smelled like her lavender soap. I looked up at the window, no movement, no one checking if I had a jacket, no one asking if I had money, a ride, a plan. Inside that house were two people who called themselves my parents, and not one of them came to the door. I walked to the sidewalk. It had just started to drizzle. I didn't have an umbrella, and honestly, I didn't care. I kept thinking, did I miss something? Did I do something wrong? Or was I just that easy to throw away? I slept that night at the bus stop near Oak Ridge Plaza. There was a bench under a plastic canopy. The wind still hit me from the sides, but it beat sleeping on grass. I tucked my knees up, buried my face in the sweater, and tried not to cry. That didn't work. You ever cry so quietly, your whole body shakes just to keep the sound in? That was me, cold, wet, curled into myself like maybe, if I got small enough, the world would forget to keep hurting me. And here's the thing I still can't get over. They never called. Not even once. Not to ask if I made it somewhere safe. Not to say they were angry, but still loved me. Nothing. It's wild how people can spend years pretending to care, then show you in one day how little you ever meant. Let me ask you something. If your own parents kicked you out like that, no money, no warning, no mercy, what would you have done? Would you have begged to stay, knocked again, or would you have walked away like I did, and never looked back. Seriously, tell me in the comments. I've wondered for years if I should have fought harder. That night, I decided something. I didn't know where I was going or how I'd survive, but one thing was clear. I was officially on my own. And maybe that meant I'd never be anyone's daughter again. But I would become something else. Someone they couldn't ignore. The third sunrise I watched from that plastic bus stop roof tasted like rust and instant noodles. A church van had handed out styrofoam cups of ramen the night before. God bless, kid. And that salty broth was the only thing in my stomach. My coat was still wet from yesterday's drizzle, and the cold seeped through the metal bench into my bones. I was scanning the community bulletin for any help-wanted flyers when a deep voice behind me said, "Dahlia?" I froze. No one here knew my name. I turned and saw a tall man in a charcoal overcoat, silver at his temples, and honest worry in his eyes. Uncle Marcus, Dad's cousin, someone I'd last seen at Thanksgiving, years before the Veronica era. He looked older, but the family resemblance was undeniable. "Your dad didn't mention you were in town," he said carefully. I almost laughed. "Pretty sure he hopes I'm not." My voice cracked on the last word, and that was all it took. Marcus's face shifted from polite surprise to quiet fury, though not at me. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward a diner across the street. "You're shivering." Inside, the smell of bacon and fresh coffee nearly made me dizzy. Marcus ordered 2 breakfasts, slid 1 plate toward me, then waited while I inhaled scrambled eggs like they were oxygen. Only when the hunger fog lifted did he speak. "I quit talking to Greg after he brought her around," he said, refusing to use Veronica's name. "I didn't know things got this bad." I shrugged, embarrassed by the rawness in my throat. "I'll figure it out." "Yeah," he nodded, "but you don't have to do it from a bus bench." He paid the bill, drove me to his small brick house on Maple Street, and showed me a spare bedroom that smelled like cedar instead of mildew. I kept staring at the bed, half convinced it was a prank. Marcus laid ground rules over hot chocolate that evening. Finish my GED, get a part-time job, help with groceries. In return, room, meals, and something I hadn't felt in weeks. Safety. 2 nights later, he asked if I wanted to tag along to his Wednesday night clinic. Marcus spent retirement doing pro bono work for domestic violence survivors. I watched women clutching manila folders of police photos, saw them tremble, then steady when Marcus spoke to them with that calm lawyer voice. One woman, eyes bruised purple, caught my stare and managed a small, exhausted smile. In that moment, I understood exactly why I was still breathing. Someone had to stand next to people like her, and like me. When we got home, I told Marcus, "I want to do what you do, help people who feel invisible." He poured 2 cups of tea and raised an eyebrow. "Law's a long road, kid." I answered before he finished the sentence, "Then I'd better start walking." That night, under a real roof, I felt the bus stop chill leak out of my bones. I still had nothing, no money, no parents worth the name, but for the first time since that door slammed, I had a map forward. And the first step was printed in bold letters on a GED study guide lying on the nightstand. 4 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw Ella in person. She was 9 the day I was kicked out, still wearing sparkly sneakers and carrying a lunchbox with cartoon kittens on it. She'd cried and banged on the window as the door shut behind me. Now she was 13. I spotted her across the street from the junior high near Oak Ridge Park, standing by herself with her backpack hanging off one shoulder. Her posture made my chest ache, shoulders slumped, eyes glued to the sidewalk, like she was trying to make herself invisible. I almost didn't recognize her at first. But when she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened, and for a second, just a second, I saw the old Ella, The little girl who used to sleep curled up against me during thunderstorms. Then she looked down again, quick, guarded. I crossed the street slowly, not wanting to scare her off. "Ella," I said softly. She turned her head a little. "Dahlia?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's me." She didn't hug me, didn't cry. She just stared for a long second before whispering, "I thought you were never coming back." That hit harder than any slap. We walked to a nearby bench. She picked at the threads on her sleeve while I tried not to bombard her with questions, but eventually I asked, "How's home?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at a crack in the pavement. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "She hit me, Veronica, but only when Dad's not there, and Mom says I'm exaggerating." I felt my stomach twist. "Has anyone at school noticed? Have you told anyone?" She shook her head. "Who would believe me? They love her, at least when she's around other people." I wanted to scream or march to that house and drag Ella out myself, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not legally. So instead, I pulled out a tiny recorder from my coat pocket and asked as gently as I could, "Can you repeat that last part about Veronica, just in case someone needs to hear it from you?" She hesitated, but then nodded. That night, I started building a file. Photos, timestamps, anything I could gather. I watched the house from my car sometimes, saw how Veronica handled Ella when no one was looking. And I kept collecting, because this time I wouldn't be too late. I had failed to protect myself back then. I had no one to speak up for me. But Ella, she had me. And this time, I knew what I was doing. 9 years after sleeping on that bus stop bench, I walked into family court in a tailored navy suit. My hands were steady, my heart wasn't. Inside the folder I carried were photos of bruises on Ella's arms, audio of Veronica's threats, and school reports noting unexplained injuries. Everything I'd needed back when no one listened to me, now gathered for my sister. The clerk called the case, State of Ohio v. Greg and Marianne Monroe, petition for emergency custody of minor Ella Monroe. Dad adjusted his tie. Mom clutched Veronica's hand like it was a lifeline. They looked smaller than I remembered, but the indifference in their eyes hadn't shrunk a bit. I opened with the timeline, the night I was kicked out, the years of silence, the escalating pattern of emotional and physical abuse toward Ella. Each exhibit clicked onto the courtroom screen, the purple welt, the attendance slip marked bruise check, the recording of Veronica hissing, "If you tell, no one will believe you." You could feel the jury benches stiffen. Dad's attorney tried the predictable angle. "Your Honour, Ms. Monroe is motivated by revenge, not concern. This is a family dispute." I didn't let him finish. "With respect, counsel, evidence doesn't hold grudges. People do, and the evidence is crystal." I met the judge's gaze, and for the first time in my life felt the law standing behind me instead of in front of me. After a tense recess, the judge returned. His gavel fell once, crisp and final. Temporary sole custody granted to Dahlia Monroe. Restraining order issued against Greg and Marianne. Child Services investigation to follow. Mom's jaw dropped. Dad muttered something about ungrateful, but the bailiff's stare ended it. Veronica stormed out, heels echoing like gunshots down the marble hall. I watched my parents sign the papers, hands shaking, then place the pens down as if they weighed 100 pounds. Outside, Ella waited with our caseworker. When she saw me holding the custody order, she ran, full speed, into my arms. For the first time since I was 20, someone from that house hugged me without fear. I whispered, "You're safe now, for real." Behind us, reporters snapped photos of my parents leaving by the side door, heads bowed to avoid the flash. They had once locked me out of a home. Today, the court had unlocked one for Ella, and I wasn't done yet. Tomorrow, I plan to serve them one more set of papers, the deeds showing whose name sat on the title of that old house. But for tonight, I let the victory settle into my bones like 3 days after the hearing. I stood in front of the house that used to be mine. The paint was peeling, the garden was dead, but the swing set Mum once built still creaked in the wind like it remembered everything. I walked up the path slowly, clutching a legal envelope. Dad opened the door. For the first time, he didn't bark or glare, just blinked. "What do you want?" I handed him the papers. "Eviction notice," I said quietly. "You have 30 days. His face twisted. "Eviction? You don't own—" "I do," I said. "The bank repossessed it last year after you defaulted. I bought it through a silent trust." I paused. "I've been paying off this house for 10 months now, and today I just made the last payment." Behind him, Mom stepped into view. "You planned this?" "No," I replied. "I survived long enough to make it possible." Veronica wasn't home. According to town gossip, she'd bailed the moment the restraining order went through, left a note, and took the car. "You're really kicking us out?" Dad said, voice low. I took a breath. "I'm not kicking anyone out. The system is. The same one that didn't protect me back then, but finally listened when it mattered." I turned and walked away. I didn't need to watch them crumble. That was never the point. Back at my apartment, Ella helped me unpack the last of her books into the shelf we built together. She paused, looked up at me, and asked, "Are we okay now?" I smiled and nodded. "We are. And next weekend, we're moving into the house." Her eyes lit up. "Ours?" "Ours." That night, I sat on the porch steps, looking out at the same street I used to cry on as a kid. Except this time, I wasn't crying. I was healing. And maybe that's what revenge really looks like. Not rage, not fire, not tearing things down, but quietly rebuilding what they tried to destroy. If you've ever been pushed aside by your own family, if they made you feel like you didn't matter, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have walked away or walked back stronger? Tell me in the comments. I really want to hear your story. After a long, brutal winter.